The day has come. We finally have the Miyoo Flip, and I'm going to do a full overview of this, give you a bunch of helpful tips, and I'm going to show you how to fix some things with this. For example, some of the menus are in Chinese. If you have any questions while I'm going through all this stuff, just comment below and I'll do my best to try and answer it. These are currently sold out, so if you can manage to get your hands on one of these, I promise you this video is going to be very helpful. Starting with the hardware, the Miyoo Flip comes with a 1.8 GHz quad-core Cortex A55 CPU with 1 GB of RAM, and a Rockchip RK3566 chipset. So what does that mean? It basically means that the Miyoo Flip is going to have a little bit more performance than the RG35XXSP. When it comes to games on like the PSP, Nintendo DS, the Dreamcast, and 64, but everything up to and including PlayStation 1 is going to work great. You might just get a little more bang for your buck with the Miyoo Flip on more demanding systems such as Dreamcast. I actually have a second RG35XXSP, so you can see the size difference. The Miyoo Flip is quite a bit smaller, and it feels quite a bit lighter than the RG35XXSP as well. You can see the size difference here, so the Miyoo Flip is going to be a lot more pocketable, but they both have the same screen size at 3.5 inches. It has a 640 by 480 resolution IPS screen, which is a 4:3 ratio. So that's going to give you an advantage in some games and a disadvantage in others. Something else that people will really like about the Miyoo Flip is that the buttons are on rubber membranes, so they're very quiet. Whereas the RG35XXSP has very clicky buttons. I actually like clicky buttons myself, but I do get it. When you're in a public space, these can be a little bit obnoxious. Pretty much all the buttons barely make any noise, even the back bumper buttons. These corner ones are probably the clickiest buttons on the device, and like the volume button on the side a little bit, but it's basically pretty quiet. Something not so great about the Miyoo Flip that you might have already noticed is the D-pad's pretty tiny. If I compare these, you can see that the Miyoo Flip's D-pad is pretty skinny in comparison to like the fat 35XXSP D-pad. I like this D-pad a lot, even though it is loud and clicky. But yeah, the Miyoo Flip's D-pad is a bit smaller, and I do notice that when I'm playing, so I wanted to point that out to you. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the joysticks. Ever since this design came out, people have been kind of debating about the joysticks. Some people love the fact that they're here, other people don't like it, and I get both sides. I'm on the side that loves the joysticks, and I'll tell you why. It's not necessarily because of their design or where they're located or what they can do. I'm going to show you something here. This is my daily driver, and I never cleaned this for the video because I wanted you to see the dirt and stuff on it. This is actually ash from my fire pit on New Year's Eve. And you might be thinking to yourself, what does that have to do with joysticks? Well, I take this everywhere I go. If I'm traveling, I just close this up and throw it in a bag. I've literally taken this camping with me out in the woods and hiking up on mountains. These clamshell designs are pretty much like cases in themselves. The screen's protected, you don't really need a case for these. So I always find myself grabbing this when I'm going anywhere. But there has been times where I've been like, you know what? I would like to play a Dreamcast game or an N64 game or something like that, and I'd like to use joysticks rather than the D-pad, especially for like N64 games where you got those weird yellow C buttons, and to use that on this you have to like use bumpers, and you know, it's just kind of like a weird setup. So because the Flip has this, I have a feeling that when I'm traveling around everywhere in 2025, I'm probably going to grab this, and I can still play normally like this with a D-pad and button, no problem. And it's also smaller than this, so for me it's like, why not have them there? I'm on board with it. I know why people don't like these, because they just want to play this like a Game Boy SP, and if they want to play a game with joysticks, they'll just use a different handheld. But like I said, for travel, it's great. But yes, the joysticks are severely small, and they're down in a hole so you can close the screen, and like, not in a good way because your thumb can feel the big hole around it. But the good thing is, these do click, so it gives you a couple of more button options. They do have a nice little resistance to them when you're moving them around, so they're not really loose. Like, you can probably use these pretty accurately, despite them being so small. And they do move pretty smoothly in a circle. It's not like there's an octagon shape or anything like that. On the black rubber here, you might see that there's like a ring going around on the inside a little bit, and you might think that that might help you like move the joystick around, but it doesn't. I think this is really just more for looks and design. When I'm using these, I can't feel that at all. It just feels like smooth rubber. But you can see down in the joystick holes, there are like holes and stuff down there. These holes kind of look like dust and dirt traps to me, so when you're playing, you might want to make sure that your fingers are clean, and you might want to keep the screen closed when not in use. I should maybe not use this device around my fire pit, but yeah, these are definitely not going to be the most ergonomic joysticks in the world, and you probably don't want to use these for like long game sessions. The hinge on the screen does give you different adjustment options, and you can click into place wherever you like to play from, and below that it just pretty much stays wherever you put it. It does kind of snap closed, but you can see that there is still a little bit of movement. It's not like it's going to open on you or anything like that. It does resist being opened. It's just that it is a little tiny bit loose still. Like if you compare that to the SP, when you close this, it's completely shut. There's some magnets in here that keeps this closed. And I've seen some other people talk about small things about the build quality of this, like the paint's chipped off or whatever. I can notice a little blemish here on the corner myself. And when I opened this, I noticed that my R2 button wasn't clicking down as good as my L2 button. It was actually kind of stuck and stiff, and I didn't think it worked at all. And after I clicked it a few times, it kind of loosened up. So there might actually be some dirt in here. And at the end of the video, I might just pop this off and show you back here just to see if there's anything in here. There's just 4 screws here, and you can pop this off to fix anything, so it seems pretty easy. Since we're looking at the back, I want to show you something really cool with this. The battery in here is a 3000 milliamp battery with thermal insulation to help with the heat, but I noticed that there's little holes back here, kind of like it has little heat vents, and I just thought that was really cool because the back of some handhelds can get pretty hot. After using this for a while, I do find that it gets a little tiny bit warm back here, but not too bad. But these little vents and the thermal insulation that they talk about isn't going to keep this cool. You will feel some heat back here. This does have a nice speaker placement right here in the center and a menu button up around the top, and I'm going to show you some RetroArch shortcuts in your games that'll really help you out later in this video. On the bottom you've got a 3.5mm headphone jack and a USB-C charge port. On the left you've got your volume button, and this is your SD card slot where you want to put your 64GB game card in. That's going to have your software on it as well. On the right hand side there's a second SD card slot. That's if you want to expand more game storage on a second SD card. You've got a little reset button hole and your power button. There's also a couple of indicator lights here. So you have a charge light which will be red while you're charging and turn off when it's fully charged, and you'll have the green light here when the device is powered on. I've already mentioned the bumper buttons on the top, but you do have a HDMI mini out port and a USB-C port here for plugging controllers in. So unfortunately this does not have Bluetooth like the RG35XXSP. You have to plug controllers into USB-C, which kind of sucks. So at least you have the option to plug a controller in for player 2 if you play this on a TV, or you can use that controller as player 1 if you want. But yeah, I think if you have HDMI mini out, you should just add Bluetooth to the device so that people can just use wireless. This also gives the vibrating motor function on newer systems, so it will vibrate while you're playing. I have to show you what comes in the box because I was pretty surprised about this. When I opened this up, they include a really high quality case that says Miyoo on it, and it also has a little zipper that's a controller on both sides. You can see it's pretty high quality, and there's a pocket back here so you can put your charge cable and stuff like that. But check this out, they give you an SD card reader. This is awesome, and this probably saves you 10 or 20 bucks because I had to go buy an SD card reader myself so that I could mod these devices. So for anyone buying this that does not have an SD card reader, this is a real bonus, because when custom firmware comes out for this, you're going to be able to put this into your computer and load your custom firmware on a new SD card. So yeah, this is just awesome that they included this. And they also give you a screen protector and a USB-C to USB charge cable and your 64GB SD card. And I mean, the clamshell design makes this a case in itself, but it is awesome to have a case when you're traveling so you can store your charger up here and your SD card reader or whatever. But yeah, I had to show you that because they include so much in the box. So let's plug our SD card in and see what's on it, and I'll give you a bunch of tips and tricks along the way. Unfortunately, it has one of these very cheap SD cards that'll probably break on you, so make sure you back up the files on a computer or something so you don't lose everything in case this breaks. But to plug this in, you'll want to turn this SD card around, and you just put this here on the left side and push it in, and then hold on the power button, and you'll see that green light come on. And this is running Linux. So when you first power this on, you'll hear some music playing, and you'll see a familiar menu that you've seen on other handhelds. So I'll just turn the volume down, and it has one of the coolest volume things I've ever seen. It's like a bunch of little pixels that disappear when you turn it all the way down. The first option is recent games. You can see I've already tested a few out. On the right, you've got favorites, and then game and RetroArch. So these are your 2 games menu options. I prefer to use RetroArch because you can customize so many things. But if you go into game, you have some more stuff. So let's just go in here first. You can see that there's a bunch of emulators for games, and you'll have some other things like a movie player. This doesn't have any videos on it right now. And you can see that there's 5 pages, so I'm just going to scroll through so you can see what's on here. It has a bunch of stuff on here. Also, some of the emulators don't even work. Like if I try to open a Pico 8 game, it just goes back to the main menu. So the software definitely got to be updated. But I did notice a glitch here. You can see that I can't go to the right on page 5. And even if I click on R1, I can't go to the right. But if I click on L1, I can keep going through the menus over and over. Another thing that I noticed is if you're on a different menu and you're not in the top left corner, say I go down on the bottom row and I click right, I can't go to page 5 because I'm not up in the corner like page 5 is. So that's just a little glitch. If I were you and you want to go through the menus fast, I just suggest going left so that you're not caught up with anything. You can see that even down here I can keep going and going. And when you have something selected, you can hit the menu button and you can refresh ROMs, which means if you add anything, you have to hit this to refresh it and it'll show up in your list. They give you a search function, which is great. Like say if I want to play Mortal Kombat, if I just type in Mortal and hit start, it'll search for all my Mortal Kombat games on the system. And they have artwork by the games too, which is kind of nice, even though it's a little bit squat up. You can also edit what's in the menu, so if you hit A on that, you can just turn off Super Nintendo. If you're a crazy person, I'm going to leave that on. Some of these games will probably still use RetroArch, but if I go back out into the RetroArch menu, you'll see that it's a little bit different. It's pretty much similar to the last menu. You just have a bunch of emulators for different games, but you can see that there's 2 different original Nintendo emulators on here. You won't have the movie player on this list or anything. This is pretty much just games running in RetroArch. But you'll see that some things are not on this menu, like Dreamcast or N64, for example. Another tip I'll give you is if something's not running very good in RetroArch, you can try it under the games menu and vice versa. Just go back and forth and see what works better. I'm just a little biased towards RetroArch because I like to have shortcuts and customize my games, and I'll show you how to do some of that later. In the apps menu, there's a bunch of random stuff, like you can look at a USB storage device. There's like a music player, some random games. I don't even know what Willy Willy is, but there's even like an ebook reader and stuff like that in here. There's 18 different apps and games in here. I just wanted to show you. Now over on the right is settings, and this is going to be a lot more entertaining than you think it is, and I'm going to show you the funnest one first. So if I go into settings, if I go down towards the bottom, it'll give me the option to use Emulation Station for my menu instead. It's basically just another games interface, but it offers customization as well. So if I hit A and it says, do you want to use Emulation Station by default, I can just say okay. And it'll say that the selected mode has nothing to show. You can just ignore that and say okay. But here it is. If you're familiar with Emulation Station, it's basically an interface that allows you to customize things really easily. It's very user friendly. So if I hit start, I can bring up a menu that has like an art scraper. I can change my UI settings, like I can change my theme. You can customize your game collection, configure the buttons how you want them to be. I'm just going to ignore that for now. And there's other settings like a VRAM limit, power saving modes, show your frame rate and stuff like that. When you're in the games menu, you can do a bunch of things like add things to your favorite, hit the select button to bring up a menu to sort your games or filter the list. You can even edit the game's metadata in here. And the menu is really nice looking, so it's just nice to have an option like that. But if you'd rather go back and just use the stock menu, you can just hit start and go down to use Miyoo UI. Say yes, and then it'll restart and you're back in the regular menu. But under your settings, you can also change the themes. So I noticed that there was like 4 or 5 different themes. It's on cozy by default, but if I put it on simple, for example, if I went back, you can see that it's a much different design. I'll show you another one here called Foundation. It's kind of like a cyberpunkish futuristic design. I really like it actually. Something I want to say about the power is if you let this rest for 30 seconds, it will go into an idle mode and the screen will dim. If you want to get back out of that, you can just click a button and it'll brighten back up for you. But after 3 minutes, this will go into a sleep mode and the screen and the sound will turn off. You can also put this into sleep mode if you close this up. The screen will turn off and the sound, but you can see that it's still on, and you can wake it up by opening it back up again. You can also put the device to sleep by just tapping on the power button and then tapping it to turn it back on. If you hold the power button, a menu will pop up and you can shut down the device. A lot of people wonder about the screen brightness. It does get pretty bright, but when you turn it all the way down to 1 or 0, it does get dark. But I would say if you're playing in like a pitch black room, this isn't the darkest screen in the world, world, it will be like a little tiny bit brighter than you might want it. When it comes out of the box, it's set at 7, but you can go up a few notches. But I mean, these screens are not really the best for outdoors in the daylight. It does have Wi-Fi 2.5 or 5G, so that's good for things like art scraping, or you can log into retro achievements in RetroArch, which I'll show you later as well. And even though this does say English language, there are Chinese RetroArch menus, which I will show you how to fix. And there's a little joystick calibration tool in here. So I just calibrated my right joystick and it seems to be working really well. I can really control where that is. You can even turn on turbo for some of your buttons if you want. That's your background music volume, so you might want to put this at 0 so you don't have that weird menu music. And there are some other options down here, but I want to show you how to set up your games because your games are not really set up properly and there's some things broken in the menus. So here's a bunch of tips for you. One thing that's kind of annoying is the RetroArch menus are in Chinese. I'll show you the difference. If I go into game and then go down to the original Nintendo and open Tiny Toon Adventures, you'll see that it's opening up in RetroArch. If I hit the menu button, I can bring up this nice little menu. It'll let you save your game in 10 different save slots. You can load a game and connect to NetPlay. But if you go into native menu, that's actually the RetroArch menu where you can customize a whole bunch of stuff. And if you open that, you know, it's a nice English menu. Everything's all good. If I hit B, I have even more options. But if I go into RetroArch and open up Nintendo and then Tiny Toons again, you'll see that it opens up in RetroArch, but I've got these weird bezels on the sides and you can see it's cutting off the artwork in the game, and you can see my character over here is kind of like behind this bezel. It's kind of bizarre. And to make things worse, if I hit menu, I go back out into this menu and it's all in Chinese, so I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm going to show you how to fix this right now because that has to change. Basically what you got to do is just hit B to get back out into this menu where there's a bunch of icons on the top, and you want to go to the second one. That's a gear icon. That's your settings. And then go all the way down until you see a human shape. So it's kind of like a head and a torso. Just hit A on that and then go all the way to the bottom. So if you hit A, all you have to do is go up and select English, and now your menus are in English. So I want to save this so when I open up Nintendo it's in English. The problem is RetroArch is using overrides, so I just want to remove those. So I'll go into the quick menu and go down to overrides, and then I'm going to unload this override. This will switch your menu back to Chinese. Just navigate back and change it to English again. But when I go back into my overrides, you can see that there's nothing active in here, which is good. That means we can just customize this to be English. So now that I can customize it and save it without any overrides, you can just go down to configuration file and then save current configuration. And you can see it just saved it. So now we don't have any overrides on. We're in English. We saved our configuration. So I'm just going to exit and go back in just to show you that it worked. So let's just load up Tiny Toons again. And you can see even the words here are English now. So if I hit the menu button and we go in, now we have an English menu with no Chinese overrides. This is basically the quick menu, so this gives you a bunch of options. Even though we fixed the menu language, some of the game files that come on the SD card are in another language, so just keep that in mind. But other emulators outside of RetroArch are also in Chinese. An emulator such as PSP is going to have the same problem, so you can try to figure out how to change this back to English, but the real answer is, I think we're going to get some custom firmware such as Onion OS or something like that for this. But until then, we could just tinker around with this. I'm familiar with PSP, so I know how to exit out of the game. You just go over here to the right and then go down here and select that and then you're out. But yeah, hopefully they get some custom firmware release for this, and I'll make a video on how to install that. So let me show you a few more tips in here which will really help you out. Now, something else that I don't like is my Nintendo controls are set up as A is jump and then B is to run really fast back and forth. But when I play games like this or Mario, I like to have B set up as jump and Y to run really fast back and forth. So I'm going to show you how to change your controls in RetroArch. So in order to change these two buttons here, what I'm going to do is hit menu. Now this is our quick menu. Just go down to controls. And we're going to go down to port 1 controls. Port 1 is basically this system. If you were to plug a controller into the back of here, that plugged in controller would be port 2. So let's go into port 1 and then go down to where our buttons are. So you can see that there's icons on the left here. I'm ignoring these letters. I'm just looking at these icons. So we got our bottom button, our right button, left, and the top. So that's the bottom, right, left, and top. I'm kind of ignoring the letters. So basically, I want this bottom button to be set up as A for jump. And I want this button here to be set up as B for run fast. I don't want to use these over here for Nintendo. When I play Nintendo, I want to use these two buttons. So I want this bottom button to be set up as the A function, which is jump. So I have to change that over here. So all I have to do is just select it and then change it to the A function, which is jump. So now this bottom button is jump. And now we want to change this left button to be the B function, which is run fast. So I'm going to find this left button here, and I want to change this to B. So I'll go in here and then go up to B, which is run fast. Now that's set up properly. Now this right button over here is still set up as the A function, which is jump, but I want to change that because I don't want to use this button. So I'm just going to select it and then just select something else like Turbo B. And now that's out of the equation. So we got our bottom button set up as jump, and then we've got our left button set up as run fast, and that's as complicated as it gets. So just hit this bottom button to back out, and then go up to manage remap files so we can save this. And then I'm just going to select that, and then go down to save game remap file and select that, and then it said it saved it successfully, and then we can back out and go up and resume our game. So now you can see this bottom button is jump, and then if I'm running around and I hit Y, I can run really fast, which is exactly what I want. This is how I want to play Nintendo. So it is a little bit strange when you're setting that up, but it's not bad once you get used to it. You just kind of got to fool around with it. So if you're using something like N64, it's the same deal. It's just more buttons to change. And you can always test it out. When you get it right, just save your file. I'd like to show you how to set up shortcuts, because there are some shortcuts you can use on this instead of having to go through all the menus. For example, select and start is to exit the game and go back to the main menu. But you can customize a bunch of shortcuts, and I'm actually going to set up the menu button to be a hotkey. So when you hold this menu button, you can hit stuff and then do really quick shortcuts such as save your game, fast forward, stuff like that. So let's just go into Tiny Toons, and I'll set up hotkeys so that you can just do things really quickly. So let's go back into the quick menu, and I'm actually going to back out to this main menu here, and we're going to go into this gear icon for our settings and go down to input, and then you can go down to hotkeys. So this is where you can set up shortcuts, and I want my menu button to be my hotkey. So at the very top you have hotkey enable. Right now there's nothing, so I'm just going to hit A on that and hold down my menu button, and that's button 5 is my menu button. So that's now my hotkey. So right now quit is set up as a controller combo, so I want to turn that off. So I'm going to go down to quit controller combo and just set that as none, because I don't want that. I just want to set quit as my start button only when I hold my hotkey. So let's go in here and press start. And now my quit button is hold the hotkey and press start. But because I'm using my menu button as a hotkey, if I press this, I'll bring up my menu, which I don't want. So I'm going to bring up my menu going forward as X. So if I go up here, you can see menu toggle. I'm actually going to select that and change that to X. So now if I want to bring up my RetroArch menu going forward, I can just hold my hotkey and press X. Another option that people really like is fast forward, because if you're in a game and there's like a bunch of text you gotta read, people just like to fast forward through that. So I'd like to set that up as R2. If I select fast forward, I can just say R2. Some people like to use slow motion. I don't really use it, but rewind is pretty cool, so I might try that out. So if I select that, I might set rewind up as L2. Now, a very important one that people like to do is to save your game as a state, so you can save it exactly where you are in the game and then load it back up exactly where you were in the game. So people like to use R1 as save your state and then L1 as load it back up using your hotkey. So what I'm going to do for my load state to load it back up, I'll put L1 as load, and then for my save state, I'm going to say R1 to save your game using your hotkey. So one thing about saving your games exactly where you are in the game is you can save a whole bunch of different save states. So you don't have to just have one save. And in order to manage those, you can go back and forth between your save slots. And I like to do that by using the hotkey and my D-pad left and right. So I can go like save slot 1, 2, 3, that kind of thing. So let's just set up our next save slot and our previous save slot. So all I have to do is set up the next save slot as D-pad right, and then my previous save state slot, I can set it up as D-pad left. And now when I hold my hotkey, I can go back and forth between my save states and select which one I want and then load up the game. You can actually take screenshots in your game. That's usually set up as like B on handheld, so I'll just set that up as B. So when I hold my hotkey, I can press B to take a screenshot. People like to see their frames per second, so I'll set that up as Y. And you know what? I'm probably just going to set reset the game as select. So I'll select that and hit select. And I mean, there's a bunch of stuff you can set up in here, whatever you like to do. I think that's all I'm going to do for now. So I'm going to back out to the main menu and go over to this icon and then go down to configuration file and then save my current configuration. I'm showing you how to do all this stuff manually, but just so you know, back out on the main menu, if you go to this gear icon, you can go down to saving, and if you look at the bottom of those options, you can have auto save state turned on. So if you leave RetroArch, it'll save your game for you, and when you load it up, you can turn on auto load state so it'll load your game for you, so you don't have to do everything so manually like I'm showing you. And beneath saving, there's configuration. So you can say save configuration on quit. So when you quit, your configurations will just be saved automatically. But if I go back into my quick menu and then go back into the game, just check this out. If I hold the menu button and hit Y, I now can see my frames per second up in the corner if I want to. If I want to save my game right here at the beginning for some reason, I can hold this and now I just saved my game. And if I want to load it up, I can hold this and hit L1. So that's save slot 0. But if you want to have like multiple saves, all you got to do is hold the hotkey and you can go through and pick which save slots you want. So you could have multiple game saves if you like. Now let's try out rewind. So if I want to rewind my game, you actually have to turn that on in the menu. So in order to bring up my menu now, I can hold the hotkey and press X. And then I'm going to go down and you'll see rewind. So I'm going to turn on rewind support and just see how that goes. So let's just resume the game. And I'm going to go jump on this guy. And then I'm going to hold this and hit L2. And I'm just going to hold on it. And you can see that the game is actually rewinding and it works. So I can be like, you know what? I don't want to jump on you today. And you know, if I want to reset the game, I can just hold the hotkey and hit select to reset it. So yeah, hotkeys are very, very useful and they're really fast. You can set up whatever you want to do. If you want to change the brightness when you're in the game, all you have to do is hold the start button and then hit R1 or L1. And you can see that I can change the brightness in the game. So that's pretty cool. But anyway, I'm going to exit out of this, so let's hit the hotkey and press start, and I actually have to hit it a second time, and then we're out. So hopefully you found that helpful. That'll really improve your game experience, I think. You can see that those weird bezels are gone. Basically, that's called an on-screen overlay. So if you hit the menu button and you go down to on-screen overlay, you can turn that on, and there's a few presets that you can select from. For example, right now there's a Game Boy one I can turn on, and if I hit the menu button, you can see this is like a Game Boy overlay, but it really doesn't look that great and it interferes with the games, so I just prefer to turn my overlays off. Now if you like overlays, there's a whole bunch on the system, so if you hit menu and go into your overlays, you can turn them on and go into an overlay preset, and there's all kinds in here. And if you don't see this menu, all you have to do is just go to the top and you'll see parent directory. You can hit parent directory and find like Bezels or Famicom or Game Boy, stuff like that. If you get a bit lost, you can always hit B just to go back to the next menu. But basically, I just went in and found Famicom for Nintendo, and I just scrolled through a whole whole bunch, and I seen there was something here for NES, which is Nintendo Entertainment System, and I'll hit A on that. And then if I go back, now I have like this Nintendo overlay. I just don't like overlays myself, so I prefer not to choose any and just leave them off altogether. But there's so much things like shaders, for example. If you turn on shaders, you can make your games look like an old CRT TV. So just an example, on Game Boy, if I'm playing Pokemon Blue, if I go into the quick menu and then go down to shaders and turn my shaders off and go back into the game, you'll see that now I'm on like a black and white screen. If I go back in and then go down to core options and then colorize, you can see that my Game Boy colorization, I can set it to different things. So if I set it to auto, for example, and then go back out, you'll see that I have like different kinds of color now. So you can really play around with the colors and shaders and get the look that you want. Technology is incredible. But there is one more thing I'm going to show you with this, which I think is kind of fun, and that's called retro achievements. So I'm going to turn Wi-Fi on this device, and then when I'm playing my games, I can unlock achievements from a website, kind of like Xbox achievements, and it'll pop up here and say achievement unlocked while you're playing your retro games. So let's just exit out of this, and then I'll turn the Wi-Fi on, and then show you how to turn on retro achievements. So just go over to your settings, and then go down to Wi-Fi, turn it on, and then search for your network. So you can see I'm connected to my Wi-Fi now. So if I just go boot up a game in RetroArch, I'll just boot up X-Men for Sega Genesis. Now if I open up my menu and go back to my settings gear icon again, if I go all the way towards the bottom, you can see achievements. So if you go into achievements, you just turn them on, and I'll put in my username and my password for the Retro Achievements website. Now after you got your information put in, just go down to configuration file again and then save current configuration, and hopefully that's the only time you'll have to log into Retro Achievements. Just make sure you're connected to Wi-Fi. It says right here, Retro Achievements logged in as Batpixel. So this should work for me, so while I'm playing I should unlock little achievements. Let's have some fun, eh? A fun fact, I dressed up as Gambit for Halloween in 2024. But yeah, there's so much stuff that you can customize in RetroArch. I'd suggest watching some videos about it or reading about it online. Both buttons seem to be working really well, but I'm still curious if there's any kind of dirt over here that was interfering with this one, so I'm going to take this apart and see. I did have a look at this, and it seems to be fine. There might have been a little piece of dirt, or it could have been the way it was shipped or something like that, but I don't really see any issue here. But here's a look at the battery on the back, and here's your Rockchip chipset right here. But I have to say, I think this is awesome that we got this clamshell Miyoo flip, and I'm actually really enjoying it. I remember back in 2023, I was comparing the Miyoo Mini Plus to the Powkiddy V90, and talks were already starting about how cool it would be to have a Miyoo clamshell design. If it had come out a year ago when people were talking about it, I think it would have blew our minds away more. But because the RG35XX came out in 2024, I guess our expectations are pretty high for this one. I mean, the build quality on this could be improved a little bit, but I think the main answer to this, to make this amazing, is to get custom firmware released. Once that happens, I think this is going to be an amazing clamshell handheld. So I mean, that's really it. If you pick one up now, you're going to have to do a bit of tinkering. You know, some of the menus aren't going to be very friendly. Not all the game files are going to be in English and stuff like that. It's too bad that this doesn't have Bluetooth on it though, that's kind of a bummer. But for what this is, a nice travel handheld device, I think that that's not really a big deal. But I mean, I think this is a pretty good standard base for a handheld. I'm really excited to see what the community develops for this. I hope you found this video helpful. Check out my other videos about the RG35XX SP and other handhelds. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.